She never meant to become a mother. But when Princess Azurana discovered the black market gene sculptor had implanted a forbidden terramorphic dragon egg inside her, she faced an impossible choice. Either let Warlord Thylo claim her child as a weapon, or drop the hatchling into Earth's polluted waters and pray for a miracle. What happened next would rewrite the fate of two worlds. The cramped medical suite smelled of stale ozone and cheap sterilization fluids. Azurana lay on a stained procedure table, her royal robes folded neatly on a nearby chair that had one leg shorter than the others. She watched the gene sculptor's hands move with mechanical precision, injecting fluids from unmarked vials into the implantation device. His fingers had the faint tremor of someone who worked. Outside official channels, too often she had come to Titan's underground markets because the imperial fertility clinics required male genetic contributors. Her culture measured a woman's worth by her ability to produce male heirs, and she had failed 3 consecutive betrothals when potential husbands learned she carried a rare gene that rejected standard embryo implantation. The gene sculptor promised a solution, advanced cellular integration that would let her bear a child alone. He never mentioned he would be using genetic material that wasn't human. The procedure felt like a mild electric current running through her abdomen. She focused on the ceiling tiles stained with moisture, thinking about the heir she would present to the Royal Council. She didn't notice the sculptor exchanging one genetic cartridge for another. When her eyes closed against the glare of the overhead lights, the replacement cartridge glowed with a faint amber light he quickly concealed in his palm. Terramorphic dragons were legend even in her time. Every Zephyrian child learned how these creatures once shaped worlds to their will, their biological systems capable of rewriting planetary ecosystems in weeks. They were living weapons that could restore dead worlds or sterilize thriving ones depending on their programming. The Empire had purged them 1,000 cycles ago after the Draconis uprising nearly collapsed 3 solar systems. Their genetic code was supposed to be lost, erased from every database and laboratory. For the first few months, Azurana felt only the normal changes of pregnancy. She wore looser robes to council meetings, avoided the imperial physicians, and told her attendants she was managing a delicate digestive condition. The child, she assumed it was a son, kicked strongly, and she would place her hand over her abdomen during long diplomatic sessions, imagining the future ruler growing inside her. The first biometric scan changed everything. She used a private medical drone in her quarters, wanting to see the child's development without official oversight. The display showed not a human fetal form, but something with redundant organ systems and unusual energy signatures. The readings indicated terramorphic cellular structures and dormant terraforming capabilities. The drone's alert system flashed a containment warning used only for biological weapons. She carried not an heir, but the most dangerous weapon her civilization had ever created. And the scanner identified a second genetic signature layered beneath the dragon's code, a proprietary marker belonging to Warlord Thylo. The navigation console flashed a proximity alert as Earth filled the main viewport. Azurana adjusted her ceremonial robes, the heavy fabric woven with metallic threads that concealed her altered form. The garment felt like armor against prying eyes, its traditional folds hiding the unusual curvature of her abdomen. She had chosen this particular set for its voluminous cut and the way it diffused scanner readings. Each public appearance required meticulous planning, which angles to present, how to stand, when to hold decorative items that blocked certain views. Her shuttle's internal sensors pinged softly. An automated warning indicated external scanning attempts from Thylo's surveillance network. They were sweeping for biological anomalies, hunting for the unique energy signature her body now emitted. She redirected auxiliary power to the stealth systems, knowing it would only buy minutes against his upgraded detection technology. The Prince Regent had invested heavily in planetary monitoring since expanding his claims to this sector. Medical diagnostics scrolled across a secondary screen. The egg's shell integrity measured at 97%, its internal temperature climbing steadily. Hatching cycle indicators flashed amber, then red. The display estimated emergence within hours, possibly minutes. She watched the biological readings spike with each contraction-like pulse that traveled through her body. The creature inside her was ready to enter a universe that would immediately try to weaponize it. Below them, Guanabara Bay spread out like a damaged jewel. Neon lights from floating settlements reflected on water thick with chemical swirls. Pollution warnings blinked across her topographical display. red zones indicating toxic concentrations, yellow areas marking biological hazards. The human city clung to the shoreline, a mix of crumbling infrastructure and newer off-world construction. From this altitude, it looked both vibrant and desperately fragile. Another alert sounded, higher priority this time. Thylo's interceptors had locked trajectory from the orbital patrol zone. Estimated interception in 6 minutes. She calculated vectors, escape possibilities, potential hiding places in the vast urban landscape below. Every scenario ended the same way: capture, extraction of the weapon she carried, and her execution for treason against the Imperial genetic purity laws. The egg shifted violently within her. A deep, resonant vibration traveled through the shuttle's deck plates. Through the medical monitor, she saw the shell begin to phosphoresce with internal energy, casting a warm glow through her robes. The child, the weapon, was coming now whether she was ready or not. She weighed two certainties against each other. Discovery meant Thylo would take her child and turn it into an instrument of conquest, before eliminating her as a loose end. Abandonment meant dropping a vulnerable creature into an environment that should kill it within moments. The first option gave Thylo ultimate power. The second offered a slim chance that someone, somewhere, might find value in this life beyond its military applications. Her hands moved to the emergency hatch release. The mechanism required manual override and a biometric confirmation. She placed her palm against the scanner, feeling the vibration through the metal floor intensify. The hatch hissed open, revealing Earth's atmosphere and the distant glitter of polluted water below. She made her choice not for her own survival, but to deny a warlord his ultimate weapon. The emergency hatch slid open with a hydraulic groan. Thin, screaming air rushed into the shuttle cabin, tearing at Azurana's robes and pulling loose strands of hair across her face. She braced herself against the doorframe, her knuckles pale against the metal. The egg felt heavy in her hands, its surface warm and vibrating with internal energy. Below them, Earth's atmosphere glowed faintly at the edges of re-entry. Terramorphic dragon eggs possessed natural heat-resistant properties, their shells designed to withstand atmospheric entry on most planetary bodies. But this egg was different. Thylo's genetic modifications had altered its fundamental composition, trading some structural integrity for enhanced adaptive capabilities. The shell now glowed with an internal luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with Azurana's own heartbeat. She could feel the life inside straining toward emergence. She released the egg into the turbulent air. It fell away from the shuttle, tumbling slowly at first before stabilizing with its pointed end downward. The shell's glow intensified as it encountered thicker atmosphere, shifting from amber to brilliant white. From the surface, it appeared as a sustained meteor streak cutting across the night sky over Rio de Janeiro. Several amateur astronomers tracking satellite debris logged it as space junk burning up on re-entry. One university student capturing long exposure. Photographs of the bay noticed the unusual color, temperature, and duration compared to normal meteors. The egg's descent created subtle, atmospheric disturbances that went largely unnoticed. Weather stations recorded minor static electricity spikes across the Bay Area. Security cameras near the waterfront captured faint chiming sounds that some residents later attributed to wind chimes or distant celebrations. The egg's unique composition interacted with Earth's magnetic field in ways that defied conventional physics, generating harmonic vibrations at frequencies just within human hearing range. Azurana watched through her shuttle's external sensors, her breath caught in her chest. The display showed the egg's temperature rising dangerously as it plunged through the atmosphere. She expected to see the telltale flare of disintegration, the moment when even terramorphic shielding would fail under such extreme conditions. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the sensors to track the object's final moments. The egg hit the water's surface with barely a splash. Instead of the violent impact she anticipated, it settled into the polluted bay with surprising gentleness. A soft luminescent glow spread outward from the point of contact, creating concentric rings of light that expanded across the dark water. The rings pulsed with faint energy, their light reflecting off the chemical swirls and floating debris that littered the bay. The glow persisted for several seconds before fading to a soft underwater radiance. She watched the sensor readings, expecting the biological signature to flatline as water pressure and toxicity overwhelmed the newborn creature. The display instead showed stable vital signs and adaptive cellular activity. The egg had survived atmospheric entry. The dragon had survived impact. Now it faced its greatest challenge: Earth's contaminated waters. Azurana closed the emergency hatch, the silence of the cabin amplifying the sudden emptiness in her hands. She had given her child a chance, however slim, against impossible odds. The newborn creature struggled in water thick with chemical swirls and floating debris. Its small wings, designed for the thinner atmosphere of Zephyrian worlds, beat uselessly against Earth's heavier gravity. Each attempted movement dragged it deeper into the murky water. The dragon's lungs, engineered for gaseous exchange in controlled environments, seized at the contaminated liquid. It choked on pollutants that should have been immediately lethal to any alien biology. A soft glow began at the edges of its scales. The bioluminescence started as faint pinpoints of light along its spine before spreading across its entire body. The light pulsed with a gentle rhythm, neither too bright nor too dim, casting an otherworldly illumination through the polluted water. This wasn't recorded terramorphic behavior. This was something new, something adapted. The glow formed a protective barrier around the creature. A thin, shimmering envelope of energy separated its scales from the toxic water. The field repelled the thickest contaminants while allowing cleaner water molecules to pass through. The dragon's breathing eased as the field regulated what entered its respiratory system. It floated now rather than struggled, suspended in a self-generated pocket of purified environment. Nearby water quality sensors registered the change. Automated monitoring stations along the bay's industrial sector reported sudden drops in toxicity levels within a 3-meter radius of the creature. Heavy metal concentrations decreased by 42%. Petroleum derivatives broke down into harmless compounds. The sensors flagged the readings as instrumentation errors and triggered recalibration sequences. The clean water zone moved slowly with the creature, creating a temporary wake of purification behind it. The hatchling's terramorphic nature revealed its true function. Instead of rejecting the hostile environment, its cellular structure began adapting to it. Specialized organelles in its scales analyzed the chemical composition of the pollution and generated counteragents. The glow represented not just protection but active transformation, a biological response to environmental damage. Each pulse of light corresponded to molecular-level changes in the surrounding water. Ocean currents carried the creature toward shore. It moved with the tidal flow, its glowing form visible beneath the surface like a submerged lantern. The protective field maintained its integrity despite the changing conditions. The dragon made no attempt to swim, conserving energy while its systems continued adapting. Small fish began following the light, clustering in the purified water around the unusual visitor. After 57 minutes, the creature reached the shallow waters near a crumbling concrete pier. Its glow had diminished to a soft ambient light that still repelled the worst contaminants. The dragon's breathing remained steady, its vital signs stable despite spending nearly an hour in conditions that should have killed any terrestrial or extraterrestrial organism. It had survived atmospheric entry, impact, and prolonged exposure to toxic immersion. The hatchling rested quietly in the shallows, its scales still pulsing with that soft, impossible light. Miguel Santos walked along the concrete edge where oily water met crumbling pavement. The argument with Isabella still hung between them back in their small apartment. Another discussion about fertility treatments they couldn't afford. Another night of silent distance in their separate corners of the room. The bay's familiar smell of salt and industrial runoff usually calmed him, but tonight it felt suffocating. He kicked a piece of broken plastic into the water, watching it bob in the chemical swirls. A soft glow caught his attention 30 meters out. Not the usual phosphorescence from algae blooms or reflection from the floating market lights. This light pulsed with a steady rhythm, moving against the current. It seemed to breathe beneath the water's surface. Miguel stopped walking, his maintenance worker instincts kicking in. He'd seen strange things wash ashore over the years. Damaged equipment from orbital stations, experimental biotech from corporate labs, even the occasional escaped pet from wealthy off-world traders. He picked up a long maintenance pole from a nearby repair shed. The aluminum felt cool and familiar in his hands. He approached the water's edge slowly, expecting to find some damaged lighting equipment or a malfunctioning drone. The glow intensified as he got closer, revealing a shape beneath the surface. Not machinery. Something organic. A soft chirping sound reached him, high-pitched but gentle like crystal wind chimes underwater. The creature lifted its head above the surface, water streaming from scales that shifted from deep blue to silver as he watched. The color patterns moved in deliberate waves across its body, almost like visual language. Its eyes held intelligence that went beyond animal awareness. Miguel realized the creature was struggling. Its movements were weak, barely keeping its nostrils above the contaminated water. The glow seemed to dim slightly with each effort to stay afloat. He remembered the stories from dock workers about wealthy traders abandoning expensive exotic pets when they became troublesome or illegal to keep. These creatures usually died within hours in Earth's toxic environment, their specialized biology unable to adapt. The water here was particularly foul. Visible petroleum rainbows swirled around the creature, mixed with other chemicals he knew from his maintenance work were highly corrosive. His protective gear was back at the apartment. Wading in without equipment meant exposure to substances that could cause serious skin damage. The creature made the chirping sound again, softer this time. Its head dipped below the surface before struggling back up. He thought about the empty second bedroom in their apartment, the medical bills piling up on their small table, Isabella's quiet crying in the bathroom. Then he looked at this unknown creature fighting to survive in water that was slowly killing it. The choice felt strangely familiar. Miguel set the pole down on the concrete. He removed his shoes and rolled up his pants. The water felt cold and slick against his ankles as he stepped in. Each movement stirred up worse chemicals from the sediment below. He waded deeper, the contaminated water soaking through his clothing. The creature watched him approach, its scales shifting to a calm, steady blue pattern. It made no attempt to move away as he reached out with both hands. Miguel carried the dripping creature up the narrow stairwell, its weight surprisingly light in his arms. Water soaked through his shirt where it pressed against his chest. He avoided the elevator, knowing its cameras might capture the unusual passenger. The creature remained still during the ascent, its breathing calm and even. He could feel the faint vibration of its purr-like hum through his clothing. Isabella stood by their small kitchen table when he entered, her arms crossed tightly. Her expression shifted from concern to alarm as she saw what he carried. The creature's scales glistened under their apartment's single overhead light, water dripping steadily onto the floorboards. She pointed at the trail of moisture leading from their door. Her voice came out hushed but urgent. "We can't do this, Miguel. We barely manage our own bills. If anyone reports an unregistered species..." Her words trailed off as the creature shook itself gently, sending glowing droplets across their floor. The water shone with soft blue light where it landed, creating tiny constellations on the worn wood. The light faded slowly, leaving no stain behind. The creature turned its head to look at Isabella. Its eyes held a depth of understanding that made her take a step back. This wasn't animal awareness, this was something closer to human consciousness, but different. The intelligence in its gaze felt ancient and completely foreign. It made a soft clicking sound, then a series of gentle chirps that seemed almost conversational. Miguel realized he hadn't coughed since leaving the bay. His chronic respiratory condition, worsened by years of maintenance work near chemical spills, usually left him wheezing after any physical exertion. He took a deep experimental breath, expecting the familiar tightness in his chest. Nothing happened. The air moved easily through his lungs for the first time in years. Isabella noticed the change in her own body. The constant ache in her joints, particularly in her hands where arthritis had begun curling her fingers, was fading. She flexed her hands slowly, watching the movement without the usual sharp pain. The relief came not as a sudden absence, but as a gradual warming sensation that spread through her limbs. She looked from her hands to the creature, then to Miguel. They found their largest washing basin and filled it with clean water from their limited storage. The creature stepped into the container willingly, its scales shifting to a contented blue-green pattern. It circled twice before settling into a comfortable position. Its body curled naturally to fit the confined space. Its glow softened to a gentle ambient light that filled their small kitchen with a soothing radiance. Within minutes, the creature's breathing slowed into the regular rhythm of sleep. It made soft purring sounds that vibrated through the water in the basin. The sound reminded Isabella of distant wind chimes she'd heard as a child visiting her grandmother's village. The light from its scales pulsed gently with each exhale, creating patterns on their ceiling that moved like underwater reflections. Isabella reached out and touched Miguel's arm. Her fingers no longer felt stiff or painful. She looked at the sleeping creature, then at the faded photograph of the child they'd never had on their wall. The creature had brought light into their dark apartment. Literal light from its glowing scales, but also something else. A different kind of brightness that had been missing from their lives for too long. She whispered the name almost without thinking, as if it had been waiting there all along. Estrella. Estrella's presence in the small apartment created changes that began subtly overnight. The air itself felt different by morning, cleaner and easier to breathe, carrying a faint scent of ozone like after a thunderstorm. Miguel woke without the usual congestion in his chest, taking deep breaths that felt smooth and unrestricted for the first time in years. Isabella rose from bed and noticed the absence of pain in her joints immediately. She flexed her fingers, watching them move without stiffness or discomfort. Their small collection of plants showed the most visible transformation. A spider plant that had struggled near the window suddenly sent out vibrant new shoots, its leaves deepening to a rich green. A dormant orchid on the kitchen window shelf produced 3 new buds overnight, their petals unfolding with colors more intense than any bloom it had managed before. The plants seemed to respond to Estrella's presence, growing at rates that defied their natural cycles. The dragon remained in her washing basin, observing the household with quiet curiosity. Her scales shifted through subtle color patterns throughout the day, responding to sounds and movements around her. She developed methods of moving without flight, using her claws to climb onto nearby furniture, or employing a gentle floating motion that carried her short distances above the floor. Her wings remained too small for proper flight, but she adapted to her environment with quiet ingenuity. Downstairs, their neighbor's child achieved what doctors said would never happen. The boy, who had never walked due to a congenital nerve condition, took 3 unassisted steps across his bedroom. His parents initially thought it was a fluke until he repeated the movement later that afternoon. They noticed other changes too. The chronic cough that plagued their building's residents seemed less frequent, and the usual tension among neighbors gave way to more conversations in the hallways. Local environmental sensors recorded unexplained improvements across the neighborhood. Water quality readings from the bay showed decreased pollution levels near their building's outflow pipes. Air quality monitors detected higher oxygen concentrations and lower particulate counts within a 2-block radius. The changes weren't drastic enough to trigger official investigations, but maintenance workers noted the anomalies in their daily logs. Crime statistics for their sector showed an unusual dip over the following week. Minor offenses like vandalism and theft decreased significantly. Residents reported feeling less inclined toward conflict, describing a general sense of well-being that permeated the building. People who normally kept to themselves began checking on elderly neighbors. The building superintendent noted fewer repair requests and arguments over shared facilities. No one connected these changes to the small creature living in apartment 4B. The Santos family kept Estrella's presence hidden, though her influence spread through ventilation systems and water pipes. Their home became an unofficial sanctuary where people felt better, without understanding why. Miguel and Isabella watched these developments with growing wonder, realizing they sheltered something far more extraordinary than they had imagined. Estrella continued her quiet observation of human life, her scales pulsing with soft light that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Senora Martinez noticed everything that happened in their apartment building. She had watched the Santos family for years from her window across the courtyard. Noting their quiet sadness and increasing isolation, she saw how they rarely had visitors, how Miguel's shoulders slumped when he returned from work, how Isabella's hands often trembled when she carried groceries up the stairs. Their grief over being childless had become part of the building's atmosphere, something everyone sensed but never discussed. Their recent change in behavior caught her attention immediately. Miguel started whistling on the stairs. Isabella began smiling at neighbors instead of looking down at her feet. They moved with energy that seemed impossible given their previous exhaustion. But they also became more secretive, closing their curtains earlier, speaking in hushed tones on the balcony, receiving no visitors but somehow seeming happier than they'd been in years. Unusual sounds began drifting from their apartment in the evenings. Soft chimes that didn't match any known wind chimes or electronic devices, a rustling that sounded like large wings folding and unfolding, sometimes a gentle purring vibration that traveled through the building's plumbing. Senora Martinez initially dismissed these as building noises until she realized they only occurred when the Santos family was home. Her chronic migraines vanished when she visited their floor to collect a misdelivered package. The pain that usually plagued her afternoons simply disappeared as she stood outside their door. The relief lasted for hours after she returned to her own apartment. She began making excuses to visit the fourth floor, checking the mail, speaking with other neighbors, noticing each time that her head remained clear and her thoughts sharp. She observed that Miguel stopped purchasing his respiratory medication from the pharmacy. Isabella no longer bought the joint pain relievers she'd relied on for years. Their medical subscriptions lapsed without renewal. The changes were too dramatic to ignore. People didn't simply overcome chronic conditions without treatment. One evening, she saw a glow through their slightly parted curtains. Not the yellow of lamplight or the blue of a view screen. This light pulsed with organic rhythm, shifting between soft blues and greens. It moved around the room as if alive, casting strange shadows that didn't match any furniture shapes. She watched for nearly an hour before the glow faded and normal lighting resumed. She researched recent unusual events in their neighborhood, accessing public monitoring logs. The reports included that falling star over the bay weeks earlier, dismissed as space debris but noted for its unusual trajectory and lack of debris field. Water quality improvements in their sector that environmental officials couldn't explain. Minor energy fluctuations that matched the timing of the Santos family's behavior changes. Her son Marco worked for off-world traders handling exotic biological materials. During his weekly call, he mentioned how wealthy collectors paid fortunes for rare alien creatures, especially those with adaptive capabilities or unusual biological properties. He described creatures that could purify environments, heal illnesses, and were worth more than entire city blocks. She connected the dots slowly but surely. The timing of the falling object, the health improvements, the strange sounds and lights, the stories of valuable creatures. The Santos family hadn't just found happiness. They had discovered something extraordinary, something that could explain all these impossible changes. Azarana stood before the Imperial Council, her ceremonial robes perfectly arranged to conceal both her emotions and the emptiness where her child had grown. She delivered her report with practiced precision, describing the tragic loss of the genetic material during atmospheric entry over Earth. Her voice remained steady as she detailed the supposed disintegration, the sensors showing no survival signature, the complete destruction of valuable property. Council members nodded gravely, accepting the loss as unfortunate but ultimately acceptable given the risky nature of black market procedures. Only Warlord Thylo watched her with unblinking eyes, his expression giving nothing away. Deep within Thylo's private laboratories, scientists monitored galactic biological signatures with equipment far more advanced than standard Imperial issue. Their sensors detected a faint but consistent terramorphic energy pattern, emanating from Earth's southern hemisphere. The signal pulsed with a rhythm that matched developmental stage readings, something impossible if the creature had truly perished. They cross-referenced the coordinates with Azarana's reported entry vector, finding an exact match over Guanabara Bay. The scientists immediately flagged the anomaly for Thylo's attention. Azarana's ceremonial sash hung in her private chambers, its intricate metallic threading concealing microscopic technology. The gene sculptor had woven a bio-tracker into the fabric during her initial appointment, a safeguard to monitor his valuable investment. She believed the tracker deactivated upon contact with water, assuming it had gone silent when the egg hit the bay's surface. The device remained dormant for weeks, its systems waiting for specific energy signatures to reactivate its functions. Thylo's surveillance drones began systematic sweeps of the bay area. Their sensors picked up unusual energy fluctuations consistent with terramorphic activity. The readings concentrated around a particular neighborhood, growing stronger at regular intervals. The drones mapped the patterns, noting how the energy seemed to pulse in response to environmental conditions. They detected purification effects in water and air quality that matched historical records of dragon terraforming capabilities. The evidence mounted with each passing day. Estrella's emerging powers triggered the dormant tracker. Each time she used her abilities to purify water or heal the environment, the microscopic device registered the unique energy signature. It began transmitting intermittent pulses back to Zephyrian receivers, its signal growing stronger as her capabilities developed. The tracker adapted to Earth's electromagnetic interference, using the planet's own atmosphere to boost its transmission range. What should have been a dead device became an active beacon. Azurana discovered the active tracker during routine maintenance of her ceremonial wardrobe. Her handheld scanner picked up the faint transmission as she passed it over the sash. The readout showed an active signal with Earth origin coordinates. She initially thought the device malfunctioned, running 3 separate diagnostic checks. Each confirmation showed the same result. The tracker was live and transmitting from the exact location where she had abandoned her child weeks earlier. Her hands trembled as she recalculated the implications. Her child lived. The dragon had survived Earth's toxic environment against all odds. But the active tracker meant Thylo would already have the coordinates. His forces would be preparing retrieval operations, possibly already en route. She imagined what would happen when they found a defenseless hatchling with unprecedented adaptive capabilities. Thylo would weaponize the creature immediately, erasing any chance of it developing naturally. She had to reach Earth before his forces did. Every standard protocol warned against unauthorized planetary visits, especially to protected worlds like Earth. The risks included diplomatic incidents, criminal charges, and possible execution if caught interfering with sanctuary planet operations. But the alternative meant allowing her child to become a weapon in Thylo's expanding empire. She began gathering discrete transportation options, using channels outside normal Imperial networks. The race to Earth had begun, with her child's future hanging in the balance. Azurana stood before the weather department door, her tourist disguise feeling thin under the fluorescent hallway lights. The non-Imperial transport had left her at a Rio spaceport hours earlier, its cramped seating and recycled air a stark contrast to her royal shuttle. She adjusted the simple, human-style jacket that hid her posture too perfect for Earth casual wear. The biotracker in her palm pulsed with steady rhythm, confirming the signal originated behind this particular door, in a building that smelled of cooking oil and damp concrete. Miguel opened the door with careful movement, his body positioned to block the interior view. His eyes moved over her quickly, noting the unfamiliar cut of her clothing, the way she held herself with unconscious regal bearing. Her accent marked her as off-world before she spoke a complete sentence. He kept one hand on the doorframe, ready to close it against this unexpected visitor. 3 centuries of interstellar contact had taught humans caution around strangers who stood too straight and spoke too precisely. From the interior room came a soft chirping sound Miguel recognized immediately. Estrella moved into view behind Isabella, her scales shifting to curious blue patterns. The dragon made a series of gentle clicks that sounded almost questioning. Azurana's composed expression fractured at the sound. Her hands came up slightly, then dropped to her sides as she saw how the creature pressed against Isabella's leg for reassurance. The apartment felt smaller with Azurana inside it. She stood near the washing basin that served as Estrella's bed, her eyes tracing every detail of the creature's healthy appearance. The dragon showed no signs of the developmental issues she had feared might occur in Earth's environment. Its scales shimmered with vitality, its movements confident and curious. It watched her with intelligent eyes that held no recognition of their biological connection. She explained her situation in measured tones, careful not to reveal too much, but needing them to understand the danger. Her words described Warlord Thylo's interest, the genetic copyright claims, the weaponization plans. She spoke of her impossible choice between certain death for them both, or almost certain death for the hatchling alone. Her voice remained steady until she described watching the egg fall toward Earth's polluted waters. Then it wavered slightly. Miguel and Isabella listened without interruption. Their hands found each other's naturally, their bodies forming a protective barrier between Azurana and Estrella. When she finished, Miguel shook his head slowly. His voice carried quiet conviction. "She's not a weapon. She's our daughter." Isabella's grip tightened on his hand, her eyes never leaving Azurana's face. Azurana watched how Estrella responded to the human's touch, how the dragon's scales shifted to calm patterns when Miguel spoke softly to her. She saw the family photographs on their wall, the careful arrangements they had made for the creature's comfort. These people saw her child not as property or military asset, but as family. The realization settled in her with surprising weight. They reached agreement through unspoken understanding. Azurana would provide protection and information about Estrella's needs. She would visit secretly, using her knowledge to help them avoid detection. In return, she could maintain contact with the dragon she thought she had lost forever. The arrangement felt fragile and unprecedented, a temporary bridge between two completely different worlds. But it offered something none of them had expected to find. A way forward that didn't require surrendering what they each held most dear. Estrella's influence expanded as she matured, her abilities reaching beyond the small apartment into the surrounding neighborhood. The air within several blocks began carrying that same fresh, storm-cleared quality that had first appeared in the Santos home. Residents noticed they needed to clean their windows less often, the usual grime from industrial fallout not accumulating as quickly. The changes remained subtle enough that most people simply appreciated the improvements without questioning their origin. Scientific attention arrived slowly at first. Water purification plants along the bay reported unusual efficiency spikes in their filtration systems. Engineers found contaminant levels dropping before water reached the primary treatment stages, particularly in facilities nearest the Santos apartment building. The improvements correlated with no maintenance schedules or process changes. Technical teams ran diagnostic after diagnostic, finding no explanation for the sudden enhancement in water quality. Medical researchers noticed another pattern. Children with chronic respiratory conditions who played near the bay began showing remarkable recovery rates. Asthma cases decreased in severity. Children who had required daily medication showed improved lung function tests. Doctors initially attributed the changes to statistical anomalies or undocumented environmental improvements, but the pattern held across multiple medical practices, all within the same geographic area. Estrella developed greater control over her bioluminescence. She learned to create specific light patterns that shifted in response to her environment. When neighborhood arguments erupted on the streets below, her scales would pulse with soft blue waves that seemed to calm agitated voices. Dogs that normally barked at strangers fell silent when her light patterns reached them through windows. The effect wasn't mind control but something gentler, a persuasion toward peacefulness. Her physical abilities evolved to compensate for her flightlessness. She developed a climbing technique using her claws and tail that let her scale furniture and walls with surprising grace. She mastered a gentle floating motion that carried her short distances above the ground, her body hovering just above surfaces. Later, she began phasing through solid matter for brief periods, moving through walls with a shimmer of displaced air that left no permanent damage. Azurana shared knowledge about terramorphic dragons that changed their understanding of Estrella's nature. She explained how these creatures served as living terraforming engines, their biological systems designed to transform hostile environments into habitable worlds. They weren't merely adaptable, they were ecosystem engineers that could rewrite planetary conditions through their presence. Their value went far beyond military applications to fundamental creation itself. Miguel connected this information to the changes happening around them. He realized Estrella wasn't just surviving on Earth, she was healing it. Her very existence triggered environmental repairs that human technology had failed to achieve for centuries. The improved air and water quality, the unexpected plant growth, the health benefits to residents, all were side effects of her biological function as a terraforming organism. The family's responsibility shifted with this understanding. They weren't just protecting a unique creature from discovery. They were safeguarding a planetary recovery process that offered hope for Earth's damaged ecosystems. Every day Estrella remained free and healthy meant another day of environmental healing. Their small apartment had become the focal point for changes that could eventually transform their entire world. The stakes had expanded beyond their personal safety to something much larger than any of them. The legal documents arrived in a stark metallic envelope that chimed softly until opened. Miguel found it wedged in their apartment door when he returned from work. The materials inside felt unnaturally smooth to the touch, the text shifting between languages before settling into a formal Portuguese that still carried the stiffness of translation software. Paragraphs referenced legal codes and interstellar statutes they had never heard of. The cover sheet bore the official seal of the Galactic High Court alongside Warlord Thylo's personal insignia. As Urana arrived within hours of their message, her face set in grim lines as she scanned the documents. She spread them across their small kitchen table, her fingers tracing the relevant sections. Her explanation stripped the legal language down to its brutal essence. Thylo couldn't invade Earth directly due to interstellar sanctuary treaties protecting the planet. Instead, he attacked through the Zephyrian legal system where he held advantage. The lawsuit invoked genetic copyright law, a concept entirely foreign to human understanding. Thylo's lawyers argued he commissioned and paid for the dragon embryo's creation, making him its legal owner under Zephyrian property statutes. They claimed Azurana stole his intellectual property when she took the egg from Titan. The court documents referred to Estrella as the subject organism and the genetic property throughout 67 pages of legalese. The financial stakes became clear in the damages section. Thylo demanded Estrella's immediate return, plus compensation for unauthorized use of his genetic property. The sum amounted to more than Earth's annual planetary budget. The filing included appraisals of terramorphic dragon capabilities, estimating their value at no less than 3 Class M planetary systems or equivalent resources. The numbers seemed abstract until Azurana explained that Thylo could legally claim entire worlds as settlement. Galactic courts rarely recognize non-human species as sentient beings with rights. Precedents stretched back centuries, treating unusual life forms as property unless they demonstrated human-like communication and social structures. The burden of proof rested entirely on the Santos family to establish Estrella's personhood against a legal system designed to protect genetic intellectual property rights. Most such cases ended with the property being returned to its registered owner. Miguel watched Estrella sleeping in her basin, her scales pulsing with soft light. The legal documents referred to her as a biological asset, with estimated terraforming output values. They contained technical specifications of her projected capabilities, but no acknowledgement of her emerging personality, her obvious intelligence, or the family bonds she had formed. The language reduced their daughter to manufacturing specifications and production metrics. Azurana explained this wasn't really about family or rights, or even Estrella herself. This was capitalism operating on a galactic scale, where life forms represented intellectual property and potential revenue streams. The legal system served wealthy interests by protecting their investments, not examining ethical considerations. Thylo saw Estrella not as a living being but as recovered property that could generate immense profit. Through terraforming services or weapons development, they faced a court that had never ruled in favor of non-human sentience against property claims. The Galactic High Court's composition favored corporate and imperial interests. With judges appointed through political channels, Thylo influenced heavily. Their only chance lay in presenting evidence so compelling it would force the court to confront its own outdated precedents. They needed to prove Estrella wasn't property but a person, and that her value went beyond financial calculations to something more fundamental about life itself. The legal battle would test not just their family, but the moral foundations of interstellar law. The Galactic High Court chamber felt cold, despite the careful climate control. Miguel and Isabella sat at the defense table with Estrella between them, her scales shifting through anxious color patterns. The judges occupied a raised dais that seemed designed to emphasize their authority over the proceedings. Thylo's legal team occupied the opposite table, their appearance perfectly coordinated and their expressions neutral. Thylo's lead attorney stood to address the court. His voice carried polished confidence as he argued that Estrella lacked the capacity to provide valid testimony. He cited legal precedents requiring verbal communication for courtroom proceedings, emphasizing that nonverbal species had never been granted standing before this court. His argument reduced Estrella to biological functions and response mechanisms, carefully avoiding any recognition of her evident intelligence. Azurana placed a small communication device on the table before Estrella. The device looked like a simple metal disc but contained advanced telepathic translation technology. She adjusted its settings with quick, precise movements. The judges watched with apparent skepticism, their expressions suggesting they expected the procedure to fail. Estrella placed one clawed foot on the device. Her scales glowed with soft light that spread across its surface. The device hummed quietly, projecting her thoughts into the minds of everyone present. Her voice emerged not as sound but as clear mental communication that carried emotional nuance along with words. The effect felt intimate and unmistakably intelligent. Her first transmitted thought formed with simple clarity. "My name is Estrella Santos." The statement carried weight beyond its simplicity, asserting identity where the court saw only property. She followed this with images of Miguel teaching her to navigate their apartment, Isabella showing her how to recognize human emotions, the family eating meals together. These mental pictures showed bonds that transcended species. She identified herself as daughter to both human and Zephyrian parents, projecting images of Azurana's face alongside Miguel and Isabella's. The mental communication showed how she recognized Azurana's biological connection while claiming the Santos family as her chosen home. This dual identity challenged the court's categories of ownership and relationship. Thylo's lawyers objected immediately, arguing that telepathic communication didn't meet legal standards for testimony. They claimed the device could be manipulated, that the thoughts might not be authentic. Their objections sounded increasingly desperate as the judges leaned forward with obvious interest. The court had never encountered communication quite like this. Estrella's testimony shifted from personal history to broader implications. She revealed she wasn't the last of her kind, as everyone assumed. Her terraforming of Earth's environment had created conditions suitable for other terramorphic dragons. Small eggs already lay developing in purified sections of the bay. Their genetic codes adapted to Earth-specific conditions. She projected images of these developing eggs, their soft glow visible through clear water. The revelation changed the courtroom dynamics completely. Thylo's case relied on Estrella being unique property with unlimited value. Her evidence showed she was instead the beginning of a species revival that couldn't be contained or owned. The judges conferred quietly, their earlier skepticism replaced by serious consideration. They faced not just a property dispute but a biological event with galactic implications. Estrella concluded with a simple statement that resonated through the mental link. You cannot own a species. You can only protect or destroy it. The communication ended, leaving the courtroom in silence, broken only by the soft hum of environmental systems. The legal arguments had shifted from ownership to responsibility, from property rights to planetary stewardship. Estrella's mind voice filled the courtroom again, clear and deliberate. She projected an image of ancient Zephyrian archives, showing records of banned genetic research. The evidence revealed that Thylo hadn't created her. He'd rediscovered forbidden technology and claimed it as his innovation. His lawyers shifted uncomfortably as she displayed documentation, proving the terramorphic dragon genome belonged to no one, its origins lost to time and imperial purges. She offered the court two clear paths. They could award her to Thylo as property, upholding genetic copyright laws that treated living beings as intellectual property. Or they could recognize her as a free guardian, a terraforming entity capable of healing damaged worlds across the galaxy. The choice presented a fundamental question about what the legal system valued more, property rights or planetary survival. Her mental projection shifted to show Earth's environmental transformations. She displayed before and after data of Guanabara Bay's water purification, the improved air quality readings from her neighborhood, the medical recoveries of local residents. Each example demonstrated voluntary environmental restoration, not forced service. She emphasized that these improvements occurred because she chose to help, not because anyone compelled her. She revealed the existence of other rescued species hiding across the galaxy, creatures saved from collectors like Thylo, who valued them only for their biological utility. Her mental images showed these beings living in fear on marginal worlds, their capabilities suppressed to avoid detection. She presented them not as property but as potential partners in galactic restoration, if given sanctuary and freedom. Her formal offer took shape in the judges' minds. Declare Earth a sanctuary world under interstellar protection, grant her legal personhood and autonomy. In return, she would coordinate terraforming efforts across multiple planets, using her abilities to restore environments damaged by industrialization and conflict. She would help other rescued species find safe habitats where they could contribute their unique capabilities voluntarily. Thylo's case began unraveling as the implications became clear. His claim to own Estrella meant claiming responsibility for all her actions and limitations. If she were property, he would be liable for any damage caused by restricting her terraforming abilities. The potential cost to the galaxy, dying worlds that could be saved, species that could be restored, outweighed any value she might have as a weapon or commodity. The judges conferred quietly, their expressions grave. They faced a decision that would set precedent for all future encounters with non-human intelligence. Upholding Thylo's claim meant prioritizing one warlord's property rights over the survival of multiple worlds. Recognizing Estrella's personhood meant acknowledging that some beings transcended legal categories designed for commercial disputes. Their ruling came after minimal discussion. The court declared Estrella a free sentient being with full legal rights. They designated Earth a protected sanctuary world under interstellar law, banning all genetic ownership claims within its territory. They dismissed Thylo's lawsuit with prejudice, noting his fraudulent claims of creation and manipulation of genetic evidence. The decision included sanctions against his research facilities and temporary suspension of his trading licenses. Thylo left the courtroom without looking at anyone, his legal team gathering documents quickly. His reputation suffered immediate damage as news outlets across the galaxy picked up the story. The ruling represented more than a legal victory. It signaled a shift in how the galaxy might value life beyond commercial considerations. Estrella remained with Miguel and Isabella, her scales pulsing with soft light that seemed to acknowledge the significance of the moment. The courtroom's formal atmosphere gave way to quiet conversation as officials began discussing how to implement the sanctuary designation. The Santos family stood together, their adopted daughter now legally recognized as both family member and planetary guardian. Refugee ships began arriving within weeks of Earth's sanctuary declaration. Their landing patterns created new constellations in the night sky over Rio, their engines humming frequencies that resonated through the bay waters. The Santos apartment, once a quiet space for three, became a way station for newly arrived species. Their small kitchen table accumulated datapads containing asylum applications, nutritional requirements for non-human biology, and translation software that struggled with unfamiliar syntax. Miguel and Isabella found themselves reviewing case files late into the evenings. The documents described beings rescued from collectors who valued them only for biological utility. One file detailed 3 orphaned children from the Century colonies, their parents lost during a forced relocation, their unusual capabilities making them targets for exploitation. The children had been hiding in cargo holds and maintenance corridors. For months before sanctuary transport located them, they adopted the children through Earth's newly established interspecies family protocols. The first child perceived energy spectrums invisible to human eyes, her vision extending into ultraviolet and thermal ranges that transformed ordinary environments into complex lightscapes. She often described the world in terms of color temperatures and energy flows rather than shapes and objects. The second child required mechanical assistance for breathing. His respiratory system adapted for thinner atmospheres. A compact device on his chest regulated air composition and pressure, its soft hum becoming part of the household's background noise. The third child communicated through mathematical language, his thoughts expressing themselves in equations and geometric patterns rather than words. He carried a small tablet where he drew proofs and formulas to share his observations. Azurana moved her few possessions into their expanding household. She arranged her Zephyrian ceremonial items alongside human kitchenware, creating a blend of cultures in their limited space. She learned to prepare earth foods with careful attention to Miguel and Isabella's instructions, though her first attempts at cooking resulted in surprisingly metallic-tasting dishes. Isabella taught her how to braid human hair, while Azurana demonstrated Zephyrian bonding rituals involving carefully arranged stones and whispered harmonics. Their home became a laboratory for interspecies living, each day bringing new discoveries about coexistence. Estrella embraced her role as elder sister with natural grace. She guided the children through their new environment, her scales shifting to calming patterns when they became overwhelmed. She showed them how to navigate the apartment's limited space without conflict, teaching them to recognize each other's needs through subtle cues. When the child with breathing difficulties struggled with Earth's humidity, Estrella adjusted her bioluminescence to create localized atmospheric conditions that eased his respiration. She helped the visual spectrum child interpret human facial expressions by projecting color correlations for different emotions. Earth's sanctuary designation rippled through the galaxy, offering a tangible model for other worlds seeking independence from oppressive regimes. Planets long controlled by military or corporate interests began citing Earth's success in their own petitions for autonomy. They highlighted how prioritizing care over control had yielded environmental and social benefits, previously thought impossible. The galactic community watched as a backwater planet became a beacon of alternative governance. Thylo's decisive defeat in the Galactic High Court empowered other species to challenge genetic ownership laws. His failure to claim Estrella demonstrated that even powerful figures could be held accountable. Class action lawsuits emerged across multiple systems, questioning the ethics of treating living beings as intellectual property. The legal challenges targeted not just individual cases but the fundamental framework that allowed such exploitation to exist. The Zephyrian Empire faced internal reform, movements inspired by Estrella's testimony. Citizens began questioning imperial practices that valued conquest over cooperation. Protesters carried images of the dragon alongside traditional symbols of dissent. The empire's rigid social structures showed cracks as younger generations demanded changes to genetic copyright laws and interspecies relations. What began as isolated demonstrations grew into coordinated campaigns for systemic reform. Azurana's marriage dissolution came through formal interstellar channels, severing her last official ties to the Zephyrian power structure. The documents arrived on simple data slates, their legal language stripping her of titles and privileges but granting personal freedom. She signed without hesitation, her signature precise and unwavering. The act represented more than personal liberation. It symbolized rejection of a system that valued lineage over compassion. She transitioned into her ambassadorial role with natural grace. Her new position required navigating between Earth's emerging interspecies community and the reforming Zephyrian government. She established communication protocols that respected both human directness and Zephyrian formality. Her apartment became a meeting space where diplomats from different species learned to find common ground through shared goals rather than enforced agreements. Miguel and Isabella converted their building's unused storage areas into classrooms for interspecies communication. The spaces featured adjustable lighting, multiple atmospheric controls, and furniture designed for various body types. They developed teaching methods that combined human education techniques with adaptive learning systems. Students included humans, Zephyrians, and representatives from 7 other species, all learning to understand each other's needs and capabilities. Warlords like Thylo found their influence diminishing across the galactic landscape. Military expansion budgets faced scrutiny and reduction. Diplomacy and mutual protection treaties received increased funding and support. The economic models that had rewarded exploitation gave way to systems that valued sustainability and cooperation. Traditional power brokers struggled to adapt to this new political environment, where compassion yielded better long-term results than coercion. The galaxy's shift from conquest-based expansion to guardianship became evident in policy. Changes in resource allocation, planetary development initiatives now emphasized environmental restoration and cultural preservation. Military fleets transformed into emergency response and aid distribution networks. The change represented not just practical adjustment but fundamental rethinking of what constituted valuable political outcomes. This new paradigm, centered on care rather than control, emerged as the lasting consequence of one dragon's survival. The political transformation demonstrated that compassion could reshape power structures previously thought immutable. What began with a single act of rescue had grown into a galactic reconsideration of how societies might value life beyond utility and ownership. The shift created possibilities for relationships that previous generations could scarcely imagine. The city of Rio designated the stretch of shoreline where Miguel found Estrella as protected historical ground. The area showed little physical evidence of that night, just weathered concrete and water that still carried traces of pollution, despite years of improvement. Preservationists installed simple barriers and informational displays describing the event in multiple languages. The site attracted visitors almost immediately, people who came to stand where the miracle began. Debate emerged about appropriate commemoration. Traditionalists argued for a statue of Miguel or Estrella, something solid and recognizable. Others wanted a living memorial that reflected the ongoing nature of the transformation. The planning committee received designs from across the galaxy, each proposing different interpretations of what deserved remembrance. The discussions revealed how differently people understood the event's significance. They selected a design featuring crystallized material that interacted with light and water. The memorial stood where the water met the land, its structure appearing to grow from both elements. Its surfaces shifted color with the changing daylight, mirroring Estrella's scale patterns. At night it emitted a soft glow that pulsed gently in rhythm with the tides. Water passing through its base emerged cleaner than when it entered, continuing the purification process that had begun with Estrella's arrival. The inscription required minimal discussion. They chose simple words that captured the essence without grand statements. Here, love found a way. The phrase worked in any language, conveying both the improbability and the emotional truth of what occurred. Visitors often touched the words as they read them, their fingers tracing the carefully carved letters that felt warm even on cool days. The monument's purification function became its most valued feature. Local communities began using water that passed through it for ceremonies and healing practices. Scientific instruments confirmed the water showed reduced contaminant levels and unusual energy signatures. The effect wasn't as powerful as Estrella's direct influence, but it persisted consistently regardless of conditions. The water maintained its purified state even after leaving the monument's immediate area. Pilgrims started arriving from across the galaxy. They came seeking healing, hope, or simply connection to the story that had changed interstellar relations. Some brought containers to collect the purified water. Others sat quietly near the monument, watching the light play across its surfaces. The site never felt crowded despite constant visitors. There was space for everyone's reflection. Estrella visited occasionally when her responsibilities allowed. She would phase through the monument, her energy enhancing its effects temporarily. During these visits, the water purification became more efficient and the light patterns more complex. She never stayed long, but her presence reinforced the connection between the memorial and the living being it honored. Visitors fortunate enough to witness these visits described feeling profound peace afterward. The site hosted regular interspecies gatherings and educational programs. Miguel and Isabella often led discussions about their experiences, while Azurana explained the galactic context. Children from multiple species played together near the water's edge, their games incorporating elements from different cultures. The programs emphasized practical cooperation over theoretical discussions, showing how diverse beings could work together effectively. The memorial came to represent ongoing commitment rather than past events. Its continuous purification work demonstrated that compassion required active maintenance. The crystal structure required no cleaning. It seemed to maintain itself through the same processes it facilitated. This self-sustaining nature made it a powerful symbol of how compassion could become self-reinforcing once established. The monument stood as both memory and promise, its light reflecting on water that had once been poison and was now becoming pure. Visitors left with a sense that transformation remained possible anywhere, under even the most unlikely circumstances. The site reminded everyone that miracles could begin with single acts of care, and that such acts could ripple outward far beyond their original context. Estrella's transformation from abandoned weapon to universal guardian reveals that true power emerges not from strength, but from courage found in vulnerability. Her story demonstrates how the smallest act of compassion can ripple across galaxies, reshaping entire civilizations. Family is defined not by shared genetics but by chosen bonds of care and commitment. The most extraordinary power isn't the ability to terraform planets, but the determination to protect what others would discard. One act of rescue can become a revolution when it's grounded in unconditional love, rather than calculated gain. Their family grew through conscious choice rather than biological imperative. Each member arrived with trauma and loss, their bonds forming through mutual care rather than genetic obligation. The apartment's walls gradually became covered with artwork combining human drawings, mathematical equations, and energy pattern representations. The space felt increasingly crowded but also more complete, each being contributing unique perspectives and capabilities. They established routines that accommodated different needs: quiet hours for the mathematically inclined child, designated spaces for the visual spectrum child to process overwhelming input, regular maintenance checks for the breathing apparatus. The children who had never known stability began to flourish in this environment. They developed ways to communicate across their different modes of perception, creating a unique family language that blended words, equations, and color patterns. Estrella remained at the center of this emerging community, her terraforming abilities now directed toward nurturing rather than planetary transformation. The family represented something new in the galaxy, a chosen kinship that transcended species, biology, and origin stories. Their connection was built not on what they were, but on who they chose to become together. Estrella's wings remained too small for flight in Earth's gravity, but this limitation triggered the emergence of other abilities. She began phasing through solid matter for short periods, startling her family the first time she passed through a wall to reach a crying child. The transition happened without sound or visible disturbance. Her form shimmered briefly, then reappeared on the other side of the barrier. She used this ability to visit hospital patients confined to sterile rooms, providing comfort without risking contamination through normal entry methods. She developed the capacity to create small portals for transporting objects across distances. The portals appeared as ripples in the air, circular distortions through which she could pass medicine, food, or emergency supplies. These gateways remained stable for only seconds but allowed immediate response to crises without logistical delays. A child suffering an allergic reaction received the correct antidote within moments despite being kilometers away. The portals required significant energy to maintain, leaving Estrella exhausted after each use but increasingly precise in their application. Her vocalizations evolved beyond communication into active environmental influence. When she sang, her voice emitted frequencies that altered atmospheric conditions and emotional states. The sounds carried a quality that lifted depression and anxiety in listeners, their effects measurable through improved mood markers and reduced stress hormones. The songs also subtly reshaped local weather patterns, dispersing pollution concentrations and balancing atmospheric pressure in their immediate area. People described the experience as hearing sunlight given sound. She took on the role of teacher for the newly arrived species, showing them how to coexist with humans and each other. Her methods combined demonstration, mental projection, and gentle correction. She helped a methane-breathing species understand oxygen-based life support requirements. She showed a light-sensitive species how to navigate human cities without discomfort. Her guidance focused on practical adaptation rather than theoretical knowledge, always oriented toward peaceful coexistence. Her terraforming abilities expanded beyond water purification to include soil regeneration and comprehensive air cleaning. She could restore nutrient-depleted earth simply by walking across it, her footsteps leaving behind rejuvenated soil that supported rapid plant growth. Her presence in polluted areas triggered chemical reactions that broke down harmful compounds into harmless elements. The effects became more pronounced as she matured, covering larger areas with less conscious effort. She became a living bridge between species, translating needs and capabilities that otherwise remained incomprehensible. When a silicon-based life form struggled to communicate its dietary requirements, Estrella projected mental images of suitable mineral sources. When humans couldn't understand a species' reproductive needs, she created visual guides for appropriate habitat construction. Her translations weren't just linguistic but conceptual, building understanding across biological divides. The neighborhood transformed into a working model of interspecies cooperation. Different species collaborated on environmental projects, shared living spaces, and developed new technologies combining their unique capabilities. The community became known for its innovative solutions to common problems, all stemming from the cooperation Estrella facilitated. Crime rates dropped to near zero as mutual understanding reduced conflicts. The area attracted researchers studying successful interspecies integration. Estrella evolved from rescued hatchling to planetary guardian and teacher. Her flightlessness became irrelevant, as her other abilities provided more meaningful ways to serve her community. She moved through her roles with quiet confidence, her scales shifting colors that reflected her purposeful concentration. The family that had saved her now watched as she saved others, their small apartment serving as the calm center from which her influence spread. The first new dragon appeared in a cleaned section of Guanabara Bay 3 months after Earth's sanctuary designation. It was smaller than Estrella, no larger than a house cat with scales that shimmered like oil on water. A fisherman found it clinging to his nets, its tiny wings beating weakly against the morning air. Unlike Estrella's dramatic arrival, this creature seemed to have emerged naturally from the purified waters, its biology perfectly adapted to Earth-specific conditions. More hatchlings appeared across the planet's cleaned waterways over the following weeks. They shared Estrella's basic form but showed distinct variations in size and coloration. Some displayed brilliant green scales that shifted with light. Others had deeper blue patterns that matched ocean depths. All possessed limited versions of Estrella's abilities, primarily water purification and emotional calming effects. Their presence created localized improvements wherever they settled. These small dragons bonded instinctively with human communities. They sought out homes near water sources, often choosing households that showed them kindness. Their purring vibrations provided relief from minor illnesses. Headaches faded, anxiety lessened, small wounds healed faster. People began calling them little cousins to differentiate them from Estrella, though no one understood their precise relationship to her. Scientists struggled to explain their sudden appearance through conventional evolutionary models. The creatures showed no genetic relationship to Earth's native species, yet they fit seamlessly into local ecosystems. Their rapid speciation defied established biological timelines, suggesting an accelerated adaptation process, unlike anything previously recorded. Research teams published conflicting theories while the dragons continued appearing in purified environments worldwide. Estrella took responsibility for teaching the new generation. She showed them how to control their abilities without exhausting themselves. She demonstrated safe interaction with humans, using color patterns and gentle chirps to communicate boundaries. The small dragons learned from her example, their behaviors becoming more refined and predictable under her guidance. They responded to her with evident recognition, though their intelligence seemed more instinctual than analytical. The creatures became symbols of Earth's transformation. Media outlets called their emergence the Dragon Revolution, highlighting how they represented hope and renewal. In Rio's favelas, children kept them as companions that purified drinking water and eased community tensions. Their presence fostered cooperation across neighborhoods that had previously known only conflict. The tiny dragons seemed to thrive in areas that needed their healing influence most. Commander Thylo attempted legal action against the new dragons, claiming they derived from his stolen genetic property. The case collapsed when a young girl named Maria Silva appeared in court with her green dragon named Rocket. When Thylo's lawyers argued ownership rights, she simply stated, "You can't own love, mister." That's silly. The judge dismissed the case, affirming the dragon's right to exist freely. The creatures integrated so completely that they became considered Earth's newest native species. Their rapid adaptation and peaceful coexistence demonstrated how thoroughly Estrella's terraforming had transformed the planet's environment. Where once there was one abandoned dragon facing extinction, there now flourished an entire species that had found home. The terramorphic dragons were no longer extinct. They had been reborn through Earth's renewal.